Welcome back, true believers and all you spectacular Spidey fans, to another interesting Spider-Man PS4 related video. Now, you might be asking yourself, Evan, why are you talking about Spider-Man PS4 if the game is done, there's no more DLC, and we're now currently just waiting for the inevitable sequel, rumored to possibly release sometime in the holiday of 2021. Well, if you do recall, there is a certain specific type of comic series going on currently for Marvel's Avengers, the Avengers game made by Square Enix and Crystal Dynamics, where they are releasing prequel comics to build up to the release of the game, and because of that, it has followed suit due to the success of what Spider-Man PS4 did prior in the few months earlier within this year and back in 2018, is actually with City at War, which is, funny enough, a retelling of the main story that was already told in Spider-Man PS4 itself. So even though this is, in fact, a comic book, not a prequel novel, but actually a comic book itself with panels showing off parts of the game's narrative in really cool ways with awesome art, this was just recapping the main game. It wasn't a prequel, it wasn't an epilogue, this was just directly the comic interpretation of what the game's story was. However, if you did also pay attention to what other comics were coming out for Spider-Man PS4, you would know that they are doing a whole individual comic mini-series based off one of the main costumes that you can wear in the game of the Velocity suit, which is crazy. Now, this kind of started about like 5 months ago-ish with the first issue of Spider-Man Velocity, which is actually an epilogue to the main narrative of Spider-Man PS4. However, it does in fact take place before the City That Never Sleeps DLC. It does take place after the game's main narrative, but before the heist, Turf Wars, and Silver Lining. So it's a little in-between side story of the game that is in fact canon to the overall world of Spider-Man PS4. Now, will any of the events that occur within this comic happen within the sequel? Like, will they reference them in any way? Same thing with the events of Spider-Geddon. We don't know for sure, but it is very cool to at least get more of an expansion to the overall world of Insomniac's Spider-Man's universe and see what kind of side stories are being told with him in the world of comics in a very cool way. So it did begin with issue 1, then that's issue 5 actually, but issue 2, then issue 3, then issue 4, and then issue 5, and I do have them all in their cases because I don't want to damage them or anything, because they are really cool collectible items just in case you want to collect comics. And of course, they are obviously later on going to sell a hardcover paperback, just like they did with City at War, for Spider-Man Velocity, having all the comic panels in one giant book, which I do love, so that way I can actually frame the comic books individually if I want to, and then I can read the comic itself with a hardcover book, which is fantastic. And basically, I'm just going to do a discussion about the series itself. There will, in fact, be spoilers, so if you want to read the issues individually on your own pace, feel free to do so, and then come back to the video and hear me discuss about it. But basically, I will just kind of slightly recap the most important highlights that happened during the Spider-Man Velocity comic series, kind of point out some very interesting plot points, what could happen in the sequel if they do decide to continue on with the narrative that they did set for themselves in this story. And again, since it does take place in between the main ending of the game and before the City That Never Sleeps DLC, there's a lot of legroom for how it could be featured in the potential sequel, which is most likely happening. Same thing with the Spider-Geddon events. Will they be featured? We don't know for sure, but I could see them doing that if they are so inclined to, and it'd be a kind of nice reference slash throwback to us fans who do actually take time to read the comics. So basically, Spider-Man Velocity does in fact take place after the events of the main game, and it does showcase the entire origin of how Peter actually crafts the Velocity suit. He does in fact make it canon within the world of Spider-Man PS4. He crafts it himself. There's a purpose behind it. There's actually a reasoning for why the suit power is Blitz. For those of you who remember, each suit obviously in Spider-Man PS4 has its own unique suit power tailored to it, and the suit power for Spider-Man Velocity suit is Blitz, which is basically the ability to go faster than the average being and use that power in the actual game, which you will see footage of, to go faster. Also, when you traverse around the city, you can go a bit faster, but mainly when fighting enemies, it's like this energy of speed around you, this aura surrounding Spider-Man, and you can actually do that to increase damage when fighting enemies and protect yourself from bullet damage, which is actually very cool. And I do love how that suit power is utilized in the game, and I do find it actually very cool that they fully expand upon its narrative purpose within this standalone comic. And a little side fact is that the Marvel editors did confirm that if fans are actually intrigued enough in this series of Spider-Man Velocity, and they are up for it, they may in fact do more spin-off comics, standalone comics, off certain suits from the game. Now, which suits could they be? I don't think they would be like the Future Foundation suit or the Bombastic Bagman suit, but I could see them doing more standalone spin-off comics based off of the Insomniac original suits that they made specifically for the game, like the Advanced suit, of course. Now we have Spider-Man Velocity. The other ones I could see them doing is the Resilient suit, which is one of the first DLC suits that came in with the Heist DLC pack, and that was an Insomniac original design. They could do a comic based off of that, which would be very cool. They could also do Undies if they want to, which would be hilarious. Or what I'm hoping for is Anti-Ock spin-off comics based off that suit, because I love that suit, even though it kind of wouldn't make sense since it kind of got destroyed after the end of the game. They could always do that just to revisit a fan favorite suit in a very cool way. And we do have the next issue of Spider-Man PS4 Comics to look forward to in January of 2020, which is actually going to revolve around the Black Cat Strikes, which is going to retell the story of Spider-Man and Black Cat interacting with each other from the Heist. Now, I don't know if it's going to be a retelling of the exact Heist DLC, like frame to frame, or if they might dive deeper into the backstory of this iteration of Felicia Hardy, which I really hope they do. But the Spider-Man PS4 comics are just beginning, pretty much, you guys. So there's a lot more to look forward to within the realm of the game, building up to the hype of the inevitable sequel to release, and hopefully if Marvel's Avengers is exciting people by the time it releases in May, then that is going to be epic to get a 5-issue miniseries of Spider-Man and Black Cat before that game launches, and also before the sequel launches for Spider-Man, which is fantastic. But regardless, there is still a lot more to dive into within the Velocity series, because we do have new characters that were slightly referenced in the game itself, multiple times actually, both in dialogue shared between Peter Parker and Mary Jane, and also heard during the J. Jonah Jameson podcast, Just the Facts, which is fantastic. We actually get to see a very kind of D-list Spider-Man villain who looks actually amazing in this comic, is Swarm. Now, you would think that Swarm would be the main villain of this series, but actually it's just kind of the catalyst for how Peter begins to form his epiphany and his scientific mindset as to how he can begin to form a more armored Spider-Man suit with that of the Spider-Man Velocity outfit. And he also uses the speed that the outfit can provide later on in the narrative of the comic, but before he uses it mainly as a new form of spider armor, like the Spider Armor Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3, Mark 4 that we have in the alternate suits of the game itself, but this one is actually the canonical version of what the spider armor could look like in the game. Like, for example, the Anti-Ock suit is literally to be reinforced based off of the technology, the same material that Doc Ock's tentacles are based off from, that are made from, that Peter uses to build the Anti-Ock suit. Now, it is armor, but its mainly use is to try and fight Doc Ock. However, after the ending of the game, Peter then goes to make off a fully armored Spider-Man suit to cover all layers of his body and also provide him extra strength, extra protection, and extra speed that is used to fight off against this mysterious poltergeist, which we will dive into a bit later. Now, also, like I said earlier, they do introduce new characters in this comic with Swarm, kind of a D-list villain that shows up briefly. Spider-Man does end up taking him out using the Velocity suit, so he is kind of back in jail or the raft. But I do think that there is, in fact, a lot of stuff to go down with the series that does involve Swarm. We could possibly see him in the sequel. I doubt it, though, because he seems like more of a small, minor villain that you wouldn't expect a full boss fight from. Who knows, though? They could always feature him in the game in a very cool way, but we will wait and see. But again, the other characters that they do feature is, in fact, Robbie Robertson, Ben Urich, and actually Quentin Beck, funny enough. Now, Quentin Beck in this universe is actually a mystic, like a fortune teller, kind of a psychic, to, you know, double down on the Mysterio persona. He doesn't go by Mysterio in this comic. He's literally just appearing as, like, a psychic as Quentin Beck. He doesn't seem to be a villain yet. And it's weird because we do see the Mysterio Easter egg of his broken helmet in the game as one of the backpacks, and Peter has fought him in the past, but we don't see him recognize him in this comic, so that tells me that in this universe, Peter Parker doesn't know that Quentin Beck is Mysterio, or maybe he is actually a different version of Mysterio in the game itself. Maybe it's not Quentin Beck, maybe it's someone else. We also know that the Lizard is running around, but there is, in fact, a lot to dive into with this series that is very interesting. Also, again, Ben Urich, since Mary Jane is, in fact, working at the Daily Bugle, she is actually underneath direct orders by her boss, her employer, of Ben Urich. Her editor, her senior editor slash publisher, Robbie Robertson as well, is there to help her, but they are both there to kind of guide Mary Jane on the right path with her Daily Bugle job antics. You know, she got into a lot of trouble legally when she actually investigated the Fisk auction house at the beginning of the game in Spider-Man PS4, so now she's actually tasked to investigate this kind of poltergeist happening that's going on with this, you know, this person who died, this Maggie person, connecting to Oscorp, because as we know, throughout the game, the entire purpose as to why Norman Osborn was conducting such cruel experiments to Martin Lee and thus birthing Mr. Negative in this universe is actually because he's trying to find a cure for Harry. He was originally trying to find a cure for his wife, his late wife, who has now passed away, but now that Harry is sick, now that he has the symbiote kind of healing him in that, you know, cryo chamber tank that we see at the end of the game, he has continued to conduct experiments from the past that are trying to catch up to him by the name of someone going by James Harvey, which, if you read the comics, that's a very deep cut by a very D-list Marvel villain overall, not just related to Spider-Man, but also just a Marvel villain in general, of the Speed Demon, also known as the Wizard, who you may recall from Jessica Jones Season 2 or Season 3, I believe. They take that villain and turn him into a victim, because he is actually experimented on by Oscorp, and thus he gains these speed powers. Sadly, he used them too much, and he actually ends up burning himself up due to how fast he's going, how fast he can go with his super speed. And actually, sadly, because he passed away, he did have a wife, and they did have a child who his powers passed on to by the name of Haley Harvey. So in this comic universe, in Spider-Man PS4's universe, Haley Harvey, the daughter of James Harvey, is the game's universe's version of the Speed Demon slash the Wizard. So it's pretty cool that they are taking that very deep cut Spider-Man character or Marvel character and inputting them into a Spider-Man comic, directly tying into Spider-Man PS4, which is very interesting. And she's basically furious. She has this power. You know, she knows that her dad passed away due to Oscorp and all this, and the experimentations that were going on with her father, and her mom has kind of had to suffer this kind of backlash from investigations and all this stuff, and she just wants to be left alone, but she's angry at society and just, you know, everyone around her, because she's different. She has these speed powers, and she doesn't know what to do with them, so she's just trying to make sure that her family is kept safe from any investigations that might kind of put them out in the public, or out her, Haley specifically, for having these speed powers, which is a very interesting, you know, quirk, power that she does have based from her father. MJ begins to dig a bit deeper. She then discovers that Haley Harvey is just a junior attending Midtown High School, the same high school that Miles Morales attends within the game's universe, and she then discovers that Carla Harvey is her mom, that she then tries to talk to about her situation, and then Haley comes barging in because her mom lets her know via text that there is a reporter snooping around just to let her know that she might be being asked questions, but then Mary Jane informs the mom that James Harvey actually wanted to out Oscorp with this investigation story. At first, they thought they were digging into the family just to get a big scoop and try and, you know, get the story and try and out them for being different. But no, actually, it turns out the dad, James Harvey, was wanting to contact people at the Daily Bugle and just journalists in general to try and out the people at Oscorp so that no one else would have to suffer the same fate that he did. And because of this misunderstanding, Mary Jane ends up getting attacked by Haley, and then she, in the process, is knocked out by Haley, and she is furious, and then because of how fast she is, she literally can burn up the oxygen around her, setting her on fire, creating even more fast powers of speed than you can ever imagine before. Now, again, how fast is she? And how fast is Peter in the Velocity suit using this Blitz power? We're not really too sure. We don't know if it's like Flash level speed, but it's faster than the eye can process, because every time that she goes fast, it feels like that the world is slowed down, if not stopped completely. and to do a comparison, with Peter actually honing the powers of his Velocity suit, he actually accidentally sets himself in a same time loop that Haley is in with how fast they can go. So they're on the same wavelength of speed. Peter is going just as fast as Haley, except Haley, with her own power set, is actually being able to go a bit faster than Spider-Man. But since they're on the same wavelength of speed, Peter is then trying to use literally 10 seconds of time in our time, which feels like hours for him. He tries to stop crime in New York City while also trying to manifest a cure for Haley, and also trying to revisit Mary Jane, try and tell her what's going on, but she can't see him or understand him because he's going at such a fast wavelength of speed that she doesn't even know that he's there. So he then goes around the city, he does some funny antics, he stops crime, he actually goes into a grocery store and takes food and eats it, but he also leaves money for the cashier while paying for food that he has just eaten, since of how hungry and how fast he's burning up calories at going at such a fast speed, which I find is very funny to see in the comic itself. And he then kind of gets a better perspective as to how Haley is dealing with her speed. She's been like this for years. She feels alone since no one else can actually connect with her at this super speed wavelength. It's hard for her to control her powers, and because of that, Peter then comes up with like a very in-depth plan to try and stop Haley and try and talk her down. Say, you know what, I understand where you're coming from. I know that you've been dealing with these powers ever since birth, but now you've just recently manifested them, and I know they are angry at the world for not understanding how hard it is for you, but I'm Spider-Man, I know exactly what you're going through. And he tells her this, like with I lost my uncle, and I lost my aunt, and I lost my mentor, Dr. Otto Octavius. He's telling her all these things like at a personal level, which is very cool to see. And then he tries to calm her down, and they end up fighting in Times Square, which is a very cool, very well laid out artistic, fashion in this comic. I really do appreciate the paneling and the artistic style that is inputted within this whole series, and the dialogue that you see. Each individual speech bubble has one word per bubble, just to show how fast they are talking at this wavelength. It's very cool. Now again, how exactly is Spider-Man able to go at this fast of a speed with this suit? They don't really explain it, but just like think comic book knowledge, of course. But again, they utilize the Blitz suit power fully within the comic, which I do find very cool that they found a story purpose for such a small aspect in the game itself as a, a power-up, essentially. They have it as a main story element in the game, which is very cool to see. And I really do appreciate the writer, Dennis Hopeless Helm, for doing that and actually layering the entirety of the Spider-Man PS4 universe with the suit power and the actual powers that Spider-Man has and Haley has based off of the genetic hereditary nature that the speed power is actually embraced within Haley's own genetic biology, and how Peter is trying to say, well, you have these powers, you can try and use them for good or bad, but it's up for you to decide. Now, I can cure you. I've been trying to find a cure for your speed, but I'm not going to because I want you to be responsible with these powers that you are lucky enough to have. Now, that is a very interesting thing for Peter to do. He ends up destroying the cure right in front of Haley's face, but that's just kind of the short summary as to what happens in the scene. It's very interesting for Peter to do that, and again, it's a very tough love scenario scene that we do see in the comic that Peter does to Haley, but you do understand where he's coming from since he was bitten by a spider with these amazing powers, and he got his life taken away when he lost Uncle Ben. He didn't really have a choice at then, but he did, because with great power comes with great responsibility, and he chose to use his powers for good and for the good of others. Now, he sees that Haley is suffering a similar fate. She has these powers thrusted upon her from her dad, and she's just angry at the world and doesn't know what to do, and Peter, seeing that this is a very similar situation, offers her a cure, but then takes it away from her and just encourages her to try and be greater, literally. Like, he literally says at the end of the comic, go be great. If you need me, I'm here for you. So he's trying to, mentor her in a way, try and be there for her on a supportive level. But I just felt very out of place for Peter, specifically since he does say earlier on, I know what you're going through, and I know that it's hard to make a choice like this to how to live your life, knowing that you have these powers. and then he takes away from her. So you can read it for yourself and decide how you interpret that scene. I appreciate it for what it was. It's something new. It's something different. It was just unexpected is all for me, for someone who loves Spider-Man, and specifically who loves this version of Spider-Man more than any other version out there. Basically, at the end, Mary Jane writes her story for the Daily Bugle, not, you know, outing the Harveys, which is the family, Haley and her mom Carla, and the dad James, the Harvey family, the Speed Demon family. She doesn't out them, but she rather outs Oscorp for experimenting on this individual, James Harvey, but she then, you know, commemorates him in the article that she writes, saying that he is a victim of this, you know, abuse that was put on Oscorp, and then they kind of put more of a dent on the overall Oscorp brand, which is very nice, and it honors her late father in a very memorable way. And at the end of all this, Peter then has the Velocity suit explode, because it kind of malfunctioned, and he then kind of lost his super speed blitz power after fighting Haley, but then he remodifies the Velocity suit and then gifts it to Haley herself, then having her becoming the actual persona of the Wizard instead of the Speed Demon. So the Speed Demon is like the evil version of the Wizard. At the end, she literally has this crazy looking super suit, and she is now the Wizard within the universe of Spider-Man PS4, and she is going to be a hero. So it's very cool now that we have another hero besides Miles Morales in this universe. We have Haley zipping around New York as the speedster known as the Wizard. Now, obviously, is she going to have that name? Is that the actual name that they're going to use for her in the game universe? We don't know. But the character James Harvey in the comics is, in fact, the Speed Demon / the Wizard. And this is his daughter, Haley Harvey. And now she has the super suit to use whenever she wants. And Peter literally described, you know, counterclockwise for fast, clockwise for slow, or whatever it is. He then has her hone her powers with this suit. So now she's able to control how fast she goes, what she wants to do with it. It obviously looks like she's going to be a hero within this universe instead of an antagonist or an anti-hero or just a rebel. And yeah, so now Peter's Velocity suit is destroyed, which then leads us into the comic of the Black Cat Strikes, where it is going to, I think, retell the events of the Heist DLC while also giving us some backstory / background history of Felicia Hardy within the Spider-Man PS4 universe. Overall, sorry, voice crack. Overall, I really did enjoy this series. It's something new. It's something fresh. It's innovative in the sense that I do appreciate that they're doing these individual comics based on some costumes alone, just off of Spider-Man, which is very cool to see. If you love the game, I think you'll love this. If you love more lore about the overall world of Spider-Man in general, like some obscure characters like that of Swarm and the Speed Demon / the Wizard, I think you will enjoy this a lot. And again, let me know what other suit you would like to see be featured as a comic. Again, we have the Advanced suit in City at War, and the game itself, we have Spider-Man Velocity now in his own standalone comic series, and there's Haley as the Speed Demon in the comic. What suit would you like to see? Would you like to see some of the other armored suits? Would you like to see a classic suit series based on the classic suit in the game? Would you like to see undies? Again, would you like to see anti-Ock? Anything else, just let me know, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Overall, if I did have to rank it, I can't really rank City at War because it's literally just retelling the game's main story. They do kind of analyze more perspectives from Miles Morales, Mary Jane, and Otto Octavius, which I do really enjoy. But it's overall just the same story, just in a comic book form, and I gave the game a 10, so if I use that same logic, I would give this comic a 10, because it really doesn't do anything too different based off the main story. This, however, is, again, a comic based directly off of the game, telling a new story from a new perspective that we've never seen before for Spider-Man, kind of acting like as the Flash in a way, since he's going extremely fast, and fighting a D-list character, but also giving her some more context and hope in the sense that she will become a hero just like we know Spider-Man to be. And because of that, again, there are some slight, odd writing decisions that are done. At one point, again, like I described, it's not like, oh my god, this ruins the comic overall. It just felt like out of place for me personally. If you like it, that's awesome. But for me, I really like the way that they're doing these comics. I love the art style. I think it's fantastically drawn and really colorful in the sense of how vibrant Spider-Man is as a character and the villains he has, the other supporting cast that are involved within the story. The paneling, again, is excellent, and I just love how they did an entire comic based off a separate suit in the game, which is fantastic. So because of that, I'm going to give Spider-Man Velocity a solid 9 out of 10. I really did enjoy it, and I am very excited to see where the Black Cat comic goes in the future. It does come out January 15th, 2020, I believe is the exact date, and I will review that whole series once it's done. Fully finished publishing all these separate issues, because it is going to be, again, another mini-series. I know you guys liked, of course you love Spider-Man PS4 just as much as I do, but I'm sure you guys like the comic too, so I will try and do a type of giveaway for the comic later on, maybe early in 2020, near around the time that the Black Cat issue comes out. So if you're interested in that, let me know, and if you have a highlight of the entire story, let me know your favorite moment. What do you love the most about Spider-Man Velocity? Is it your favorite suit? Maybe you don't like the suit as much, but maybe you do like it a bit more now because of the comic. I've seen some people say that, actually, and it's very cool that an entire comic can now turn someone's perspective around for wearing an entire alternate suit within a video game, which is just awesome to see the mediums of video games, comics, and superheroes collide with one another in an extremely fun and entertaining way. But until next time, everyone, I know it was a long review, but I just want to discuss all my points about the comic. Haley Harvey is a very interesting character in my opinion. Mary Jane and Peter Parker reading the voices in the sense of Laura Bailey and Yuri Lowenthal is fantastic, and I definitely think that the main writers at Insomniac, John Paquette, Ben Arfman, and Christos Gage, would be definitely proud of the series that Dennis Hopeless Hallam and Emilio Lizo have put together in this miniseries, and I'm very excited for what is going to come next. Hopefully the same thing can be said with the Marvel's Avengers prequel comics. The first issue is kind of meh, but we'll see what the other issues have in store in the coming months. But until next time, everyone, thank you all so much for watching. Stay spectacular, Spidey fans. Peace out.